Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Powerhouse Podcast. As you know, this is really our space to have the deep, courageous, connected conversation and truly redefine what it means to be a leader in today's environment. And as we've always discussed, leadership is all about how you choose to show up, all about how you choose to serve others, and all about how you choose to take personal responsibility inside those two spaces. And so today it is with great honor and my privilege to introduce just a powerhouse thought leader in this space, Dr. Stephen Hobbs, who is joining us. First of all, welcome, Stephen. I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here.
And so let me tell you a little bit about what makes him just this powerhouse and why I am so absolutely delighted to have him here joining us in the ring to go a few rounds on this episode. He really is a man who invites entrepreneurs to make and keep conscious business and life pivot commitments. And I really want to get into the space around what that means to really pivot. He is the CEO of the WELLth Movement, and WELLth is WELLth. And so I love that it's all around that wealth for yourself and being in the space of wellness. He is a mentor, instructor, facilitator, and coach. He is a meeting and retreat facilitator, thought note speaker, published author. He has books and books and books and just a wealth of expertise and knowledge that is available. He is a cast member of 2 life awareness documentaries. Wow, how great is that? And then is researching wise practices for facilitative mentoring. And so all of that being said, I mean, and there's so much more. I know your accolades just extend like miles and miles and miles. What really had you step into this space around creating the WELLth Movement? What does that mean? And how are you helping entrepreneurs, business owners, and emerging leaders in that space?
Stepping into it, I'm going to go back to 1987 and a pile of rocks in the middle of the road in Uganda, Eastern Africa.
Oh, wow.
And it was at that point in time that I was driving with my driver on the road from one place to another, and I was working on HIV and AIDS health promotion and disaster preparedness around tree planting. Quite the combination. Driving along the road, and when there's a pile of rocks in the middle of the road, you stop, because what it means is that there's a military checkpoint.
Wow. So
the soldier walks over, machine gun up, in the window, touches the tip of my nose. Okay, so I'm looking at this Kalashnikov machine gun. Okay. And I started to answer the questions, and I started to notice that the gun started to waver a little bit. So I was pushing it to the side, because in my mind, I'm going, I don't want to lose my head. I'll just lose my hearing. Right? But I was attempting to answer the question because my driver and the soldier are having a conversation. So this went on for about 3 minutes. And the gun really started to wobble. Other soldiers were laughing at this soldier because the gun was wobbling. So you can appreciate there's a lot of things going on at that point in time. And then finally there was this sort of, there you go, kind of statement, and my driver pulls away. And I'm looking in my side mirror, and I said to my driver, I said, how old was that soldier? And he said, she's about 14 or 15. And I went, yeah, okay, that would make sense. So let's put this in perspective. 14 to 15-year-old young woman, I'm in her workplace. The gun is so heavy that she can't hold it. That's why it's floating. The other soldiers are laughing because they can see this, and she's attempting to save face, do what she's supposed to do. So in her mind, think of all the things that are going on. In my mind, think of all the things that are going on. And as I'm driving away, I said, whatever I do from now on is that I don't want another young woman to have to pick up a gun. Oh. And I said that I'm going to do something that was going to be profound, and I was going to be for the world, not in the world.
Oh, I love that.
And so I started down this path that led me to the creation of WELLth, WELLTH, which is about well-being and well-living to the nth degree, that led me into this whole world of movement and the connection with leadership and management, led me into this world of mentoring. So as my gift to that young woman, I call her my 3-minute mentor.
Oh my goodness.
She shifted my life dramatically. Now, there's other things that took place during that time with HIV and AIDS, because this was back in the 80s when things were really coming out. And the things that I was involved with are just amazing. There's lots and lots of stories there.
Wow. And I mean, I'm actually physically having a response to the whole story that you shared. I mean, not only is my whole body tingling with what I want to call the God bumps or the goosebumps or whatever they are, there's just those defining moments. I love how 3 minutes could be such a powerful defining moment for you to choose to step into this place. And I think about all the various things. I mean, in 3 minutes, how many thoughts go through your mind? How many thoughts are going through her mind? This whole epiphany of this was a moment. But what I really am just amazed and astounded by is the discovery process and the choices you made as a result of that incident. I think so many times we have these beautiful gifts, which in some cases, that's exactly what this was, and defining moments that can just on a dime pivot everything for us and change everything. Yet oftentimes we don't step into that space for that discovery and to look at the opportunity for choice that's ahead of us. And the fact that this moment created a space where you recognized, and the two things that I really heard that stood out were that you are for the world, not in the world. So what can you create for the world versus just being another player in the world? Wow, incredibly profound. And then this idea of creating this movement around well-being and well-living to the nth degree. And so when you talk about that wellness, that's taking wellness to a whole nother level, right? Because it's not just about us, it's about what we can create for the world around us. Talk a little bit more around that sense of well-being and well-living and what that really means. Because I'm fascinated and deeply moved with this whole experience that you're sharing with us.
Well, the aspect of wealth, this well-living and well-being, the well-being is for the person. The well-living is for the persons. So I don't use the word people.
Okay.
Right? It's a person and persons. And therefore, well-living is about bringing all this personal interactions. Yeah, then we can call it people if we want to. Okay, there's a group of people over there. But when you're in a managing and leading capacity, this is where I'll take the extension, is that each person that you're working with is that you lead the person and you manage the systems for the persons. Okay? And therefore, understanding that these are persons. They're not just it's the group of people I'm working with.
Right.
Right?
Right.
There's a well-being and a well-living that's sitting there in front of you, and they're integrated, they're complementary. You can't have one without the other. You can't pick up a coin without picking up both sides.
Right.
It's the same principle. You can't pick up leading without picking up managing, and managing without leading. They are two sides of a coin. So when I started to work with all of this, I started to go, okay, well, where's this going to take me? I have no idea. So I used the term WELLth learning was the first iteration. I'm going, yeah, there's lots of learning needs to get done. As brief introduction is, I have my doctorate. And that was a choice that I made when I came back after the trip, was, do I continue to work around the world, or do I go and do a doctorate and work for the world? That was where that came from. So I went into the whole field of adult education and human performance improvement technology, which has led me into artificial intelligence and virtual reality and all those other kind of things. But this movement aspect, this came along after this wealth learning to wealth movement. And that came about because of this quantum physics, metaphysics, physics conversation that we're having a lot more. It's coming out more and more. Is that everything is moving, is that the body is moving, like at cellular level, just like us on a cosmological, we're spinning around galaxies, we're moving all the time, yet our human nature is to try and nail it down. So, oh, it's static, see, it's not, and that just does not work. That's not a wealth approach. The wealth movement is now embracing this well-being, well-living, and really giving it the, I'm going to use a really technical leadership term here, okay? It really gives the oomph.
I like that technical term. Sometimes you need the simplicity of the technical words of the oomph, right? I mean, how beautiful is that? And the distinction, oh, it's so powerful and beautiful, the distinction around leading the person and managing the systems of the persons. And I think that is such a missed opportunity for so many organizations, because it blows my mind. It actually baffles me quite a bit. And it did in my 20 years in corporate as well, when I would hear leaders, those that were actually given purposeful opportunity to lead teams of persons and to manage the system around them, when they would say to me, but I don't have time to develop my people. And it would just, I find that, I actually found it almost offensive and just staggering to think about the fact that that connection was not being made, that the magic, the beauty, where the rubber really meets the road is in the persons that are available to then take those talents and gifts and products and services and really put them out into public consumption in a way. But it always starts with the person, right? And the fact that they see that as being a waste of time and not a place that they have opportunity to invest. I don't have time to do that. I often, sometimes a little tongue in cheek, flippantly will say back, no wonder why your organization isn't moving in the direction you want. No wonder why your financials don't look the way you want, because that has to be the first place where you really prioritize. And I love the fact that you talk about, people wanting to nail down and create this static space of how everything is just fitting in a box and everything just gets moved along the conveyor belt, instead of realizing that it's very much a dynamic process, right? It's a dynamic space that we have to feed into and be able to pull out of. And so I love that you say that technical term is really just about, sometimes you got to put the oomph in, right? And it's putting the oomph in the right spaces. And so how do you communicate with those organizations where they're missing that opportunity to really know and understand what it means to have that two sides of the coin that say leading the person and managing the system around those persons? How do you help bridge that gap? Because I feel like we're regressing oftentimes in that space in corporate America and in business in general, instead of understanding that and getting on board and creating that dynamic process to support that.
Well, it goes back to a very simple entry point into every conversation that I have. Anytime I'm meeting a team, a leader, an organization, whatever it might be. And it goes like this. Define the terms and concepts about what you're going to have your conversation about. Then agree to those terms and concepts. Then make the map using those terms and concepts. We don't, for the most part, when we enter into conversations in organizations, we don't define the terms and concepts and agree to them. We assume that we know what they mean. Like every meeting you go into, there's assumptions made. Like, no, that's why the agenda is there, is to then be able to help people understand the terms that we're going to go. Is this a marketing meeting? Well, then what does marketing mean to us? Is this an engagement meeting? Well, what does engagement mean to us? All right. And if you do that, then one of the best things to do is go right back to what does organization mean? And organization has two meanings. One is the organization, which is the legal entity. And organization also means the act of organizing. But what are you organizing? It's the organization of work.
Right.
And if you use David White, who is an awesome poet, all right, in the US, he said that work is about the opportunity to discover and shape the place where the self meets the world.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So it goes back to this being for the world, discovering and shaping. Work is really about that. That's why we talk about the workout. It's in our recreation, leisure end, I think.
Right.
It's the work that we do in our business and organization, right? You know, I've got to get to work. Well, maybe it's I've got to do the housework. I've got to get the meals cooked. We use this word work, but then all of a sudden we take the word work, boom, it's static. It's only about business. No, it's actually something about us discovering and shaping who we are for the world.
That's beautiful.
So if you go back to that and you go, well, then how do I manage and lead that? Well, you lead through the hierarchy of values of the person. Dr. John DeMartini's got this really nailed down in terms of the way he looks at it. And when you understand the hierarchy of values of the person, then you can understand the workplace culture, because the culture is an expression of the person's hierarchy of values coming together.
Right. And there's so much that is the opportunity right there. And I love the way you say that, because it's one of the conversations I have with my corporate entities as well as business owners is the assumption conversation that's happening. It's this space of every time, and I can remember it. I mean, in fact, I even had a nickname when I was in corporate as being the queen of derailing agendas, which I always thought was funny, because it was interesting to me how we could have an agenda that would ask specific questions, yet there would automatically already be a solution or a preconceived notion of what we were going to be doing. And usually we would get into the first question and I would ask, so have we considered, do we know what that really means? And how can you be 100% aligned to something we haven't even yet defined? And they would say, well, we just know that we are. And I said, interesting. Let me take this from another perspective. And do you realize that if we do that, there's a ripple effect of this, and this? And do we have the support and the people that are aligned so that that can be carried out in a way that's going to serve our clients in what you're saying is the vision? And I would usually get the deer in the headlights and the deadpan look. And my comment usually was, perhaps that's a space that we explore first before we automatically assume we know the answer. And so they would say, so are you going to come in and derail another agenda? I said, are you going to ask questions? Because the opportunity for us to get clear, I love that your first step in the process in conversation is to define the terms and the language and come to agreement on what those are. It's so interesting to me how many times we, especially the words that are what I would call those bingo buzzwords that we throw out constantly, we don't do it with our prospects, we don't do it with our clients, we don't do it with our persons in the organization. We just assume that everybody, that when we say X, everybody's in agreement of that. And never do we take that time for the simplicity of those common everyday words to make sure that we're constantly coming back and having agreement. Because I would gather, especially if it's a dynamic space you're talking about, it's not a one and done to have the terms be defined and come to agreement. It's something that you're always coming back to make sure that everything is aligned and congruent to create a more dynamic and more enhanced culture, because you do then know the intrinsic motivators for each one of those persons who's part of that environment. And so talk a little bit about the dynamic nature of coming back and doing this as a reiterative process.
And iterative, there's a word, folks. Get it into the managing and leading language conversations. Iterative, integrated. Get those pieces in, right? The way that I would start that one is to say is that words matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
right? And Edward de Bono said, words are the freezing of reality.
Mm. Mm.
However, there are no absolute words. Now, wrap your head around all that.
True. And I love that because it's true. I love when people will say something and expect me to react a certain way. And I look back and say, I define that differently than you do. So thank you once again. Especially when someone's trying to project their stuff and they use a term even like aggressive. Sometimes people will say, Candy, you're so aggressive. And my response is always, thank you. And they go, well, I didn't mean that as a compliment. And I'm like, well, I kind of define that word differently than you probably do. So, and I get to choose what I want to do with it. But you're right. There is no absolute definition for any word. I tell people, look, a word is just a data point until you put an emotional attachment or trigger to it. It means nothing unless you choose for it to mean something. Interesting way to, wow, that is very much something my brain is having a field day with right now.
Yeah, and once you understand that, right, then you can go back and let's just use an example. Let's use the word communication. Mm-hmm. Okay, communication means the message, the communication that you sent, the message.
Right.
The second way is communication is about the sending and receiving of the message. Right? The third way is communication is about the coordinating the behavior of others. Wrap your head around that one. Hang on a minute. I'm communicating because there's a behavior, right? There's this activity, behavior, consequence that I'd like to see happen, right? And if I'm asking you, can you shut the door or please shut the door, you might get two different responses, right?
Right.
But there's a fourth way of looking at communication, and that's when you break the word down, right? Now, if you write the word in, if people are listening in right now, I would ask you, write the word communication down, all right? And then go to the C near the A, near the end of the word, and move it to the other side of A. It forms the word action.
Yes, it does.
So action, community action. So communication is about getting the community into action. Persons, okay? But community is also made up of common unity, right? So communication in its heartfelt way is the level of commonness that unifies us into action.
Wow.
It's the level of commonness that unifies us for action. That's just taking one word.
Right.
That is used every day in every organization around the world. So what are you talking about? The message, the process, the behavior, being for the world. What are we talking about here when we're in a meeting? Oh, we could have fun with leadership.
Oh my God, imagine how the dynamic in those meetings would change if we would entertain and dance in that space a little bit to break down words such as communication and truly see. I could envision where a room would have like flip charts everywhere and creativity would really be flowing just in dissecting and asking the question, what do we really mean when we say communication in this context? Because it's also a contextual thing, right? Because you might have all four of those definitions be valid for the organization, but it's all a matter of what context and what you're trying to create as the end result in terms of which way it applies. But think about the creativity that you start to tap into, because now people have persons have a bigger, and I'm going to keep coming back to your word persons. I love that. Each person then has an opportunity to really showcase their voice, their perspective, their experiences, where everybody now gets a seat at the table to be seen, heard, and valued in a way that's not happening in most cases. And I mean, just what a brilliant way to break down such simple or perceived to be simple, understood words. Man, I just like, my brain is firing thinking about the creativity that could be tapped into just by giving space to dance and play with.
Let me give you another
Oh,
example.
that's beautiful.
If we tend to talk about reaction, but if you move the C to the front of the word, it creates creation. People know that one, right? So the notion of reaction is that you're in it. Creation is before it happens.
Yeah.
You see it before it happens. Okay. If you take the word flow and flip it around, it has wolf. If you know anything about the wolf hierarchy, the wolf world, it has a lot to pertain as a really wonderful metaphor around the concept of flow. So again, when we start to play with the words that we're working with, right? And even if it's just to take, what's the meaning of leadership, right? What's the meaning of management,
right?
And you just break it down and break it down. Okay, it's actually quite fascinating, because at the end of the day, having been a consultant and worked on $100 million, $300 million mergers and acquisitions from a people navigation point of view, to running a relief operation into the war zone of South Sudan, to, all these kind of things in my life, you've got to realize the simplicity of what it is that you're going to have to do. You got to get into that simplicity, because there was a really great quote, and I'm going to paraphrase. Someone says, I don't give a fig for simplicity on this side of complexity, but I would give my life for simplicity on the other side of complexity. Wow. And complexity is like a concept here that's different than complicated. Complexity is about something that doesn't have boundaries, like healthcare is complex.
Right.
Most organizations have complicated issues, not complex issues.
True.
Right? To be able to have the simplicity on the other side of that, right, is really important. So if we spend a bit of time taking and looking at what these words mean, we take the complexity out of it, get it into complicated, because complicated, you can do something with it.
Right.
Right? And I know that most times consultants are hired to define the terms and concepts and get people to agree on them. Think about it.
Sure, that is a true story. That is, yes, it is. You are facilitating to have a conversation that's just not happening.
And then you get into dealing with it and using whatever the consultant's tools are.
Well, and then building the system that you talk about, which is the management side of it, that once they come to that agreement, define the terms and then the agreement, it's creating the system that allows them to be successful in that space.
And that's why you create systems, and systems are a way to save yourself time, effort, and money and make it safer.
Yeah.
That's what systems are meant to do.
Fascinating. Fascinating. So as you are continuing to do this work, and I mean, there's just so much about you that, I mean, we could go on for hours and hours and days, because your background, your experiences, even just a little bit you're sharing with the audience today is just so, there's just such a wealth of information and knowledge and experience and understanding around a lot of these principles. And so as your WELLth movement is really, creating this space, one of the things that we've been playing in this whole year is around imagine the possibilities, and imagine if we allowed the next level of whatever's coming, because so many people get caught up in that what if space, which holds them back. And it's the negative anchoring language that you're using about what if this happens, instead of dancing and playing in a bigger imagine if. And I know for you, imagine if is like a daily space, but as you start to envision what's next, and you start envisioning where the biggest opportunities are to really reach out and connect with organizations or the persons that you're working with, to create and really integrate, I love that word so much, the WELLth movement. What is the big imagine if for you? What are you starting to really, maybe even scare yourself a little bit and jump into that space of this is the next big.
Oh,
I know, right? I love that space. I love to play in there. So yay.
well, with a business associate, we've created the International Mentoring Community, which we offer certificates of achievement and certificates of competence. Because what we see happening is that there's a lack of common sense, which is leading to a crisis of caring, which is going to require the resilience of competence. Where we're headed, we need mentoring. And mentoring is about the decision, one's decision to gift your lived experience so someone can learn something from you. You'll notice I did not use age. I did not use male, female. I did not use, it's just, I have a lived experience. You have a lived experience. The listeners have lived experiences. It's about the gift, not the giving, the gift of that lived experience so that someone can learn something from you. That's really what mentoring is about. So that the mentee, protege, learner, whatever word you want to associate with, can come to ask you questions, right? And when they learn about questions and how to ask questions of the mentor that tap into that lived experience, then the complementarity, the exchange, the integration, the iterative process, these words that we're using, starts to take place, is that the possibilities, the if possibilities are endless. So I would go so far as to say, imagine ifs.
Ooh, I like that.
IFS. And IFS stands for improve, focus, and strengthen. Because managing and leading is about what do you improve, focus, and strengthen. Mentoring is about what are you going to improve, focus, and strengthen. It just depends who you're talking to around whatever it is that's going on. So that's why I always appreciated when you went through this shift, the imagine if. I'm going, yeah, imagine if, the improve and focus. It's the imagine ifs, the improve, focus, and strengthens, right? And we went about managing and leading. We went about our daily decisions. We went about our life pivots, our business pivots from this place of improve, focus, and strengthen. That is just a glorious way to be for the world.
Oh, I love that. And I'm so going to have to borrow that and offer credit to you in every way that I say that. I love that, the imagine ifs. And what I love about what you're saying is, especially because it doesn't have anything to do with age or position or gender or location, or it doesn't have anything to do, that all of us have the opportunity to mentor with where we're coming from now, as well as allow ourselves to be open to be a mentee to learn from others. And I think there is so much opportunity and possibility in allowing ourselves to step forward. And I always say, you know, that's why I say leadership is a choice. You can, from where you're at with what you have, there's somebody that needs you at a given moment. And there's, you know, 3 questions that I always challenge people with is, who are you not serving now? Whose permission are you taking away? And who are you not letting shine their light? Because when you choose not to step in that place to mentor when you have the opportunity, and allow yourself to be the mentee to experience that gift from others. Wow, no wonder why we've got this convoluted way that our world is shaping, right? And I think the fact that, especially when I go back to your 4th definition around communication and building that community of understanding, we can't even get there right now because we're not stepping forward and taking that responsibility to mentor and be a mentee when it's open and available to us. And so, I mean, I get chills thinking about that. Imagine ifs. I love that. I love the fact that is improve, focus, and strengthen, because there's such an ownership in that too. It's not just the fluffy, because a lot of people will say that's just woo-woo to think about imagine if and play make believe, when that's when the creation really forms and the magic happens, right? And to do it in a process-oriented way, I find it interesting when people will say, Candy, how does an engineer become a coach and a consultant? And I'm like, it's actually a more linear process than you would think. Instead of just dealing with the products and services and systems, I'm dealing with people. But it's the same, applying that way to help people move through kind of the gates and move through the spaces. And so everything that you're talking about so deeply resonates with me on that level, because you're breaking it down into a very simplistic way we can take ownership and take that accountability and move that dial forward.
Yeah. And I just share, I've been doing some writing. Okay. And I went looking for something because I wrote something and it's still not right off the tip of my tongue, but I wrote, mentoring makes touchy-feely tangible.
Oh, that just gave me incredible chills. I love that, because as an engineer by degree, when people tell me, oh, that's woo-woo, I'm like, it's physics, it's science, it's energy. Even Einstein said, law of attraction is energy. It's physics. So I love that mentoring takes, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah. So and if people who manage and lead and understand that when you lead the person and you use the mentoring techniques, you're a guide on the ride. Mm-hmm. And when you're able to come from that point of view, and I've written into this world of, I've identified 10 educating approaches that managers and leaders can use. And when you understand and then appreciate what each one's about and define the terms and concepts associated with those education approaches, because education is about the caring of and to bring the power of the mind forward, not the dumbing it down. Let's raise the common sense, not keep talking about the lack of it. Let's get past this crisis of caring and get into the caring aspect, the kindness, right? That's necessary in organizations. I'm not saying it's going to take every issue and everything's going to disappear. Yet I do know that common sense with caring and competence, using those sort of C words, and we can bring those in, this possibility ifs. I'll work with whoever wants to work with around that. I'm in. I've had that machine gun stuck up my nose in the workplace.
That's such a visual, by the way, and I'm all in. And I'm in when I hear that. And every time you and I have the opportunity to talk, and I know we've been getting to know each other over the course of the last couple of years, we get to play in space together and do some things. I am completely energized by our conversations. There's such a clear vision and such a clear understanding. And I love the alliteration of the 3 C's, which is common sense and caring and competence. And I agree with you that being all in that space, while it might not solve everything, it sure can make a dent on moving things forward. And I'm all for creating some change to move some things forward, right? And I know there's some other people that are feeling as energized as I am right now. And I'm so wanting to come out of my skin, first of all, and hug you, which is always something I want to do when we have opportunity to be together, but just be like, yes, right? It's that resounding yes to say, I don't even know what it may all look like, but yes, I'm in, I'm all in. And so for those individuals right now that are experiencing something similar, and they're like, okay, Candy's right. He's brilliant. Dr. Stephen Hobbs is just a force to be reckoned with. He is this incredible powerhouse. And I want to engage and learn more and tap into the brilliance of his mind and understanding. How do they do that? What is the best way for people to learn more about this work that you're doing, get involved, and stand in a place where they can truly increase their level of confidence, increase their common sense, increase their ability to step into a purposeful space of caring, and increase their competence as well?
The best bet is the website, wellthmovement.com, WELLTH movement.com. There is a blog there I'm writing about business pivots, life pivots, and this world of mentoring. The information about the international mentoring community is there because it's under the word communities, and because I'm creating communities with other business associates. I'm not doing this by myself. I call everyone who works with me wealthers. Nice. right? People who want to take what it is that's going on. We're wealthers. We're in this, and we're going to have
Right.
some fun doing it. And then there is the contact page there, so you can just fill out the form to chat with me. There's a book, an exploration call, 29 minutes. If you want to have a chat about what's possible, I offer that as well. So that's the easiest way. Just poke around on the website, right? I think it's very clear. It talks about pivots. It talks about communities. It talks about blog. And I have something called Wholeversity, which is the wholeness university, because uni is like one, whole is the whole, so it's called Wholeversity. And I'm starting to get ready to load courses like creating the well-living workplace, right? Ethical decision-making, the use of ecological architecture, right? All these kind of things that I've been working with, thinking about, playing with for 40 some years in the workplace. So.
Awesome. And we will have, for all of you listening, they're like, oh my God, that was such a wealth of thing. All of that will be in the show notes. You can see that. And I just, such deep gratitude and appreciation for not only the work that you're engaging in and this movement you're creating, but just who you are as a person, as someone who really is in a space to be such a tremendous mentor to so many, myself included. And so just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, my soul, for you joining us and taking time to honor us with your gifts. Thank you so much for being here, Stephen. It just means the world to me.
Well, thank you, Candy. And I return back to you as well, as I get to follow the things that you're doing, and I just love what you're into and sharing with the world as you be for the world. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope that you will perhaps come back, because we didn't even get to talk about the pivots in depth, and I would love to continue to have some more conversation.
Sure.
So I hope you will join us again at some point. And as we're bringing things to a close, the time goes so fast sometimes, I swear. What is something, or a last maybe thought or nugget or a way to bring this full circle? What is something that you'd like to leave the audience before we part today?
It's a truism. I consider it truism, and it is. When you listen, you learn. When you share, you educate. So pay attention to who you're listening to, and pay attention to who you're sharing with.
Oh, that is such a powerful way to close this. When you listen, you learn, and when you share, you educate. And so for all of you listening, first, please let us extend just a heartfelt thanks again to our guest, who we are honored to have here, Dr. Stephen Hobbs. Thank you. To all of you, thank you. And hope that you will take the opportunity to step into your greatness and realize it starts with you saying yes to yourself. It is an opportunity for you to say yes to yourself so that you can be that mentor and guiding light, to be a person who truly knows when to listen and when to share. And with that, this is Candy. As always, remember that leadership is a choice. It is a choice in how you choose to show up. It is a choice in how you choose to serve others. And it is a choice in how you choose to take personal responsibility inside that space. So with that, know that I'm sending you deep heart-to-heart hugs. Love you. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you up on the next time.